For centuries, the name Catherine the Great has stirred both awe and scandal. Empress of Russia, reformer, and cultural icon, Catherine II's reign from 1762 to 1796 fundamentally transformed Russia into a European superpower. Yet, despite her monumental achievements, her legacy is often overshadowed by lurid myths about her private life. The most infamous being the false story of her death during intercourse with a horse, a tale so absurd and grotesque that it highlights the extent to which misogyny and political propaganda have worked to tarnish her memory. But who was the real woman behind the gossip? Born Sophie Friederike Auguste von Anhalt-Zerbst on May 2, 1729, in Stettin, Prussia, she was never destined for greatness. The daughter of a minor German prince, Sophie was raised in a modest aristocratic household. Her early education focused on religion, music, language, and manners, typical of noblewomen of her era. But it was her intelligence, ambition, and voracious curiosity that set her apart. She was deeply influenced by Enlightenment ideals and admired philosophers such as Voltaire and Diderot. In 1744, at the age of 15, Sophie was chosen as the bride for Grand Duke Peter of Russia, the heir to the Russian throne. The match, orchestrated by Empress Elizabeth, was politically motivated. Sophie would convert to Russian Orthodoxy, adopt the name Catherine, and marry into the Romanov dynasty to cement a strategic alliance. She embraced her new identity with remarkable zeal, learning the Russian language, culture, and customs in a matter of months. On August 21, 1745, she married Peter and became Grand Duchess Catherine. However, their union was doomed from the start. Peter was immature, eccentric, and emotionally abusive, showing little interest in his wife or his responsibilities. Catherine, on the other hand, was intellectually and emotionally starved. Isolated at court, she immersed herself in books and built alliances with key political and military figures. By 1761, when Empress Elizabeth died, Peter ascended the throne as Peter III. His short reign lasted only 6 months and was marked by disastrous decisions, including withdrawing from war with Prussia and antagonizing the powerful Russian Orthodox Church. These moves alienated the military and nobility. Catherine, recognizing the danger Peter posed to the empire, led a coup with the support of the Imperial Guard. On June 28, 1762, she seized power and declared herself Empress of Russia. Her husband was arrested and later died under suspicious circumstances, fueling the first of many rumors that she had orchestrated his murder. In truth, Peter likely died at the hands of overzealous guards without Catherine's direct involvement, but her enemies seized the opportunity to vilify her. Once on the throne, Catherine quickly set about transforming Russia. She modernized the government, reformed the legal system, expanded education, and encouraged the arts and sciences. She corresponded with leading Enlightenment thinkers and even attempted to draft a new legal code inspired by liberal principles. Yet, as her domestic and foreign policies strengthened the Russian Empire, her reputation abroad was being systematically dismantled. European courts, particularly in France and England, launched a campaign of defamation. Unable to challenge her political acumen, they attacked her femininity. The idea that a woman, especially a foreign-born one, could wield such power was deeply unsettling to the patriarchal norms of the time. Propaganda against Catherine took many forms. Pamphlets, cartoons, and whispered rumors depicted her as a depraved, insatiable nymphomaniac. Stories circulated of her maintaining a harem of young lovers, engaging in scandalous orgies, and using her sexuality to manipulate those around her. The most grotesque of these myths was the allegation that she died while having intercourse with a horse, a complete fabrication that emerged decades after her death. It had no basis in fact but was so sensational that it persisted for centuries. Ironically, Catherine's actual love life was neither unique nor excessive by the standards of the time. Over her 34-year reign, she had about a dozen confirmed lovers, most of whom were politically astute and personally devoted men who often served in key advisory roles. Her relationships with men like Grigory Orlov and Grigory Potemkin were both romantic and strategic. Orlov helped her ascend the throne, and Potemkin later became one of her most trusted generals and advisors. Unlike the licentious escapades of other monarchs such as Louis XIV of France, Catherine's personal life was subjected to disproportionate scrutiny because of her gender. Male rulers were rarely judged by their romantic entanglements. But for a woman in power, especially one who ruled absolutely, any hint of sexuality was deemed threatening. The double standard was blatant and pervasive. Meanwhile, Catherine's contributions to the Russian Empire were profound. She expanded the territory significantly, annexing Crimea and parts of Poland and strengthening Russia's position on the Black Sea. She established new cities, encouraged foreign investment, and reformed the provincial government to increase efficiency. Her reign saw the founding of the Smolny Institute, the first state-funded higher education institution for women in Russia. She promoted inoculation against smallpox and supported the development of hospitals. Yet, none of these achievements were emphasized in Western accounts. Instead, gossip and salacious fiction took center stage. Catherine also played a critical role in the cultural development of Russia. She amassed one of the world's greatest art collections and established the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg. She encouraged theater, literature, and music, creating an environment in which the Russian Enlightenment could flourish. She translated classical works into Russian, wrote essays, and even penned her own memoirs. In her letters to Voltaire and other intellectuals, Catherine discussed politics, philosophy, and reform, revealing a mind as sharp as any of her male counterparts. Still, her legacy remained tainted by the enduring myths spread by her enemies. One of the most persistent stories was that she died in a grotesque sexual act. The reality is far less dramatic. Catherine suffered a stroke on November 16, 1796, and died the following day. She was 67 years old and left behind a stable, powerful empire. Yet the lies outlived her, repeated by historians and educators for generations. These tales were not merely about shaming a powerful woman, they served to undermine female authority more broadly. By turning Catherine into a caricature of lust and excess, her enemies aimed to reinforce the notion that women were unfit for leadership. The story of Catherine the Great is not only a historical narrative but a mirror reflecting the biases and prejudices of society. The disinformation campaign waged against her was one of the most effective smear jobs in history, managing to eclipse the reality of her intellect, governance, and diplomacy. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, even respected historians repeated these unfounded tales without questioning their origins. It wasn't until the feminist movements of the 20th century and the emergence of more critical historical methods that scholars began to reevaluate Catherine's legacy. They found, unsurprisingly, that most of the negative narratives about her personal life had no credible sources and were rooted in misogyny and political fear. Catherine's rule saw a period of unprecedented growth for the Russian Empire. Her foreign policy was skillful and opportunistic. She used the rivalry between France, England, Austria, and Prussia to Russia's advantage, maintaining a balance of power that allowed her to expand territory and influence without direct conflict. She built alliances, suppressed rebellions, and established Russia as a formidable European player. Domestically, her reign was marked by attempts at modernization. Though she was unable to completely abolish serfdom, a decision often criticized, she took steps toward legal reform and improved the lives of many Russian subjects. Her role in education, especially for women, was groundbreaking. Catherine believed in the power of reason and saw education as essential to progress. She wrote instructional texts for children and supported educational institutions across Russia. Her passion for the arts led to the flowering of Russian culture in a way that would resonate for centuries. Yet, while she expanded Enlightenment values, she was also a pragmatist. Catherine understood the limits of reform in an autocratic and deeply stratified society, and she carefully navigated these boundaries to maintain stability. Despite facing several serious rebellions, including Pugachev's rebellion in 1773, she maintained her grip on power. Pugachev, a former army officer posing as Peter III, rallied discontented serfs and Cossacks. The rebellion was brutally suppressed, but it exposed the cracks in the Russian social order. Catherine responded by tightening control but also accelerating certain reforms to pacify unrest. She maintained support from the nobility while attempting to curb their worst excesses. Her ability to manage both internal and external challenges speaks to her political genius. Yet throughout her life and long after her death, the public and scholars alike often focused not on her statecraft, but on her rumored sexual exploits. This was not mere curiosity, it was a deliberate strategy to diminish her accomplishments. The myth of her insatiable appetite and scandalous behavior served as a cautionary tale about powerful women. In reality, the queen who supposedly died in carnal ecstasy with a horse was a shrewd, strategic, and enlightened monarch whose reign left a lasting imprint on world history. Today, as we re-examine the lives of historical figures through the lens of modern scholarship, Catherine the Great stands out not only as one of the most effective rulers of her time but also as a victim of gender disinformation. Her story is a reminder of how deeply sexism can shape historical narratives. The same traits that were praised in male rulers, strength, ambition, intelligence, were weaponized against her. Even her legitimate romantic relationships were spun into scandal, while her political acumen was ignored or diminished. But modern historians have peeled back the layers of myth to reveal a woman who was far more remarkable than the rumors suggest. Catherine's true legacy lies in her reforms, her diplomacy, and her vision of a modernized Russia. She demonstrated that a woman could rule a vast empire with the same, if not greater, competence than her male counterparts. Her reign laid the groundwork for Russia's emergence as a dominant force in European politics and culture. Her correspondence with Enlightenment philosophers enriched her policy decisions and influenced the intellectual climate of her court. Her founding of educational institutions and cultural centers showed a deep commitment to progress. Perhaps the greatest lesson from Catherine's life is that power and gender do not need to be mutually exclusive. She proved that female leaders can be just as effective, strategic, and visionary as any man. Her reign, though plagued by lies, continues to inspire historians, feminists, and leaders around the world. By confronting the myths and acknowledging the truth, we not only do justice to Catherine's memory but also challenge the prejudices that persist in the telling of history. Catherine the Great was not a nymphomaniac. She was not a murderer. She was not the woman of perverse fantasies concocted by frightened men. She was an empress, a reformer, a visionary, and one of the most influential rulers of the 18th century. Her life reminds us that greatness is often threatened by ignorance and that the truth, though sometimes buried under layers of scandal, always has the power to rise again. The myths about Catherine say more about the insecurities of her enemies than about the Empress herself. It is time the world sees her for what she truly was. Not a scandalous woman, but a brilliant sovereign who defied expectations and changed the course of history.